In a world where success is measured by numbers and hearts are traded for ambition, one man stood at the peak of it all. Ethan Crowe, a billionaire tech genius, had everything: power, wealth, and a view of the world from his glass tower. Yet beneath the glitter of luxury, he battled an emptiness no fortune could cure. His life changed the night he found Max, a stray golden retriever who reminded him of loyalty, warmth, and truth. But when faced with a deal worth billions, Ethan would have to choose his conscience and his dog, or the empire he built. The city skyline glimmered like a crown each night, and atop its tallest tower sat Ethan Crowe, the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. His tech empire, Crowe Dynamics, had revolutionized artificial intelligence, earning him fame, fortune, and the kind of influence most people could only dream of. His name echoed in the corridors of power, flashing across magazine covers and news broadcasts. Yet, despite the applause of the world, Ethan's penthouse was a silent palace. The rooms were large, the floors immaculate, but the air carried a loneliness that money could never buy away. His life was a schedule: meetings, numbers, decisions, and every night, the city below seemed alive while he felt more mechanical than the robots his company built. One stormy evening, as lightning fractured the sky, Ethan's car screeched to a stop at the edge of an empty road. There, trembling under a broken streetlight, was a soaked golden retriever, muddy, frail, and alone. Something in its helplessness pierced through the wall Ethan had built around his heart. He opened his car door without a second thought. The dog hesitated, then slowly climbed in, curling at Ethan's feet as if it had been waiting for him all along. Ethan named him Max. That night, Max slept on a rug worth more than most people's yearly salary, but neither man nor dog cared about that. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't fall asleep thinking about profits. He slept listening to the soft rhythm of another heartbeat beside his own. Days turned into months, and Max became Ethan's shadow. At the office, on private jets, during interviews, even at charity galas. He didn't care about Ethan's bank balance or achievements. He just wanted to be there. Each morning, Ethan traded board meetings for walks through Central Park, finding joy in the simple act of throwing a ball. For the first time, laughter replaced exhaustion. In Max's loyal gaze, Ethan rediscovered something he'd forgotten long ago: the feeling of being human. Months later, Ethan's name dominated headlines again. Not for his innovations this time, but for his silence. Investors grew restless, wondering why Crowe Dynamics hadn't released a new product in nearly a year. What they didn't know was that Ethan had changed. His time with Max had shifted his vision. He no longer saw technology as a race to dominate, but as a tool to protect and connect humanity. Yet the corporate world wasn't patient with conscience. During a grand tech summit in Dubai, Ethan was approached by a coalition of international investors, men in suits worth more than nations. They offered him $14 billion to sell Crowe Dynamics outright. It would make him one of the wealthiest individuals alive. But as they spoke, the room darkened. Not from the lights, but from their intentions. The investors revealed their plan: to transform his artificial intelligence into an advanced global surveillance network capable of monitoring entire populations. It would be marketed as security, but Ethan saw it for what it truly was: control. That night, he couldn't sleep. The view from his hotel suite was magnificent, skyscrapers glittering like stars, but he felt only the weight of the decision pressing against his chest. Max lay quietly beside him, resting his chin on Ethan's hand. He looked up with those same innocent eyes that had stopped Ethan's car months ago. In that gaze, there was no agenda, no greed, no deceit, just loyalty. Ethan whispered, "What would you do, buddy? Billions on one side, or doing what's right?" Max's tail gave a slow, steady thump against the marble floor, and somehow that was answer enough. By morning, Ethan had decided. He walked into the boardroom with calm resolve. The investors smiled, confident he would take their offer. But Ethan's voice was steady when he spoke. "I built Crowe Dynamics to serve people, not to enslave them. I won't sell." Gasps filled the room. The investors warned him he'd regret it, that he was walking away from unimaginable power. But as Ethan glanced at Max waiting patiently by the door, he smiled. "Some things," he said quietly, "are worth more than all the money in the world." The news broke within hours. Crowe Dynamics' refusal to sell sent shockwaves through the global market. Investors panicked, stock prices plummeted, and journalists swarmed Ethan's company headquarters like vultures circling a storm. Headlines screamed, "Ethan Crowe rejects $14 billion deal." Analysts called him reckless. Shareholders demanded his resignation. His board of directors, people who once toasted to his success, turned against him, accusing him of emotional weakness and irrational attachment. Ethan became the villain in a story he had written with honesty. But through it all, Max stayed by his side, his quiet presence stronger than any speech could be. When Ethan walked into the company lobby surrounded by flashing cameras and angry employees, Max trotted beside him calmly, his golden fur catching the morning light like a symbol of loyalty in chaos. Days turned into weeks, and the world seemed determined to punish him for his choice. Lawsuits emerged, partnerships dissolved, Crowe Dynamics faced bankruptcy. But Ethan didn't regret his decision, not once. He spent his days in a small home outside the city, away from the noise, walking Max along the riverbanks where the wind whispered peace instead of profit. The dog chased sticks, splashing through shallow water while Ethan watched, smiling faintly. It wasn't the life he once had, but it was life, pure and unfiltered. He found joy in the ordinary, in morning coffee and muddy paw prints, in sunsets that didn't require a helicopter view. One evening, as the sun dipped low and Max rested beside him on the porch, Ethan turned on the TV. A news segment reported that the same investors who had pressured him were now under investigation for illegal surveillance projects. The anchor's voice faded as Ethan looked at Max. "Guess we made the right choice after all," he whispered. Max's tail wagged, slow and steady. For the first time in a long while, Ethan laughed. A deep, genuine laugh that came from peace, not pride. The world had turned its back on him, but he had found something far richer than billions. Truth, freedom, and a friend who never asked for anything in return. Years passed quietly after Ethan Crowe turned down the deal that would have made him one of the richest men on earth. The headlines faded, the world moved on, and new billionaires rose to take his place on magazine covers. The same business world that once worshipped him now treated his name as a cautionary tale. The man who threw away billions, they said, but Ethan didn't mind. While others chased power, he finally understood peace. He had sold off what remained of Crowe Dynamics, keeping only enough to live simply. With his golden retriever dog, Max, always at his side, Ethan moved from his towering penthouse to a modest riverside cottage an hour outside the city. The mansion lights, the endless meetings, and the noise of ambition were replaced by chirping birds, the sound of flowing water, and the gentle rhythm of Max's paws on the porch wood each morning. There was no staff, no assistants, no flashing screens, just Ethan, Max, and the sky. But peace did not mean idleness. Ethan wanted to make a difference, not through corporations or stock charts, but through people. With his remaining fortune, he began building small community tech centers across struggling neighborhoods. These weren't glossy startup hubs. They were humble spaces with free computers, Wi-Fi, and volunteers teaching children coding, creativity, and digital ethics. He named them the Light Rooms because he believed every young mind deserved a chance to shine. On every wall, painted in quiet black letters, were the words, "Do what's right, even when the world calls it foolish." He refused all corporate sponsorships. When journalists asked why, he replied, "Because real change isn't bought. It's built by hands that care." The story spread quietly at first. Students learning to code, teens finding purpose, families seeing hope. One photo went viral. A little girl showing Ethan her first working app while his golden retriever dog sat beside her, tail wagging, as if approving her achievement. Years turned like pages in a book. Max grew older, his fur silvering, his pace slowing. But his loyalty remained unchanged. On soft evenings, Ethan would sit on the porch, sipping coffee as the dog rested beside him, their eyes following the river's slow current. Sometimes, he would talk to Max about life, about mistakes, and about how a single act of kindness on a stormy night had changed everything. One evening, as the sky burned with the orange and purple of twilight, Ethan leaned forward and said softly, "You know, buddy, they called me crazy for choosing you over billions." The dog blinked lazily, tail thumping once on the wooden floor. Ethan chuckled. "But look at us now, we're free." A few months later, the inevitable came. Max, now frail and weak, slept more often and struggled to stand. Ethan stayed by his side every hour, feeding him by hand, whispering softly as if trying to delay time itself. One cold morning, as mist rolled over the river, Max rested his head on Ethan's lap for the last time. His breathing slowed, and then stopped, leaving behind a silence so heavy that the world seemed to pause. Ethan buried him beneath the grand oak tree overlooking the river, their favorite spot. On a small wooden plaque, he carved the words, "Here rests the heart that taught me to be human." After Max's passing, Ethan withdrew even further from the world. The house felt emptier, quieter, but he kept the dog's collar on the porch railing, where the sun hit it every morning. It gleamed like a reminder that love, not money, had been his greatest investment. In that solitude, Ethan began to write. He called the book The Choice. It wasn't a memoir of wealth or loss, but a meditation on conscience. The story of how walking away from power had saved his soul. The manuscript took him 2 years to complete. When it was finally published, it spread through schools, leadership programs, and universities around the world. It wasn't flashy or best-selling by corporate standards, but it touched those who read it deeply. CEOs quoted him. Teachers used his story to teach integrity. Students wrote essays about the courage to choose morality over success. When Ethan grew old, gray, and frail, he still took evening walks by the river, speaking softly to the wind as if Max were walking beside him. The villagers often saw him smiling alone, leaving small sticks by the oak tree, as if saving them for a friend who might return. And then, one morning, he didn't come out. Ethan Crowe passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 71. There were no breaking news alerts, no corporate tributes, just a quiet funeral attended by a handful of people who had known his heart, not his fortune. They laid his ashes under the same oak tree beside the dog he had once rescued, the same friend who had rescued him in return. A small metal plaque was placed beneath the tree. It read, "Here lies a man who gave up the world but gained his soul." The river still flows beside it, gentle and endless, carrying the reflection of sunlight across its surface. Like time itself bowing to the memory of a man and his dog who proved that loyalty, love, and integrity are worth more than all the billions ever printed. And though the world forgot the name Ethan Crowe, those who walked the path by that river never forgot the story. For sometimes, the greatest victories are not shouted from skyscrapers. They are whispered beneath the shade of an old oak tree.